The Australian institutional industrial complex is arguably one of the most sophisticated examples of colonial continuity, essentially using the state's own instruments to mirror the isolation and monitoring seen in individual domestic abuse. It's a heavy thought, but it's the core argument of a deep dive synthesis we're looking at today, which connects the clinical work of Evan Stark on coercive control with broader systemic patterns of what is called the end-me scam.
It's a chilling term, and it's meant to be. The end-me scam, which the author frames as an engineered four-step pattern ending in suicide by coercive control, represents the terminal outcome of what happens when individual abuse and structural indifference, or even active participation, collide. We aren't just talking about a bad relationship here, we're talking about a 15-year pattern of coercive governance layering.
To get there, we have to start with the grammar. You mentioned Evan Stark, who really redefined how we look at domestic violence. He moved us away from looking at just incidents of physical violence and toward this pattern of domination. It's about the micro-regulation of daily life, the isolation, the financial squeeze. But what's fascinating and frankly terrifying in this synthesis is how that exact same grammar is used by institutions.
Right. The documents point out that the tactics aren't just similar, they're identical. When a state agency uses asset seizure, or reversals of proof, or pressures someone to settle a claim, they are replicating the financial restriction and intimidation a victim faces at home. The synthesis highlights a specific lived example. A single mother experiencing domestic violence finds that instead of protective intervention, she's under surveillance. And the kicker, police records of her experiences were actually deleted. That was independently confirmed.
That erasure is a perfect bridge to the next big concept, DARVO. Most people who follow psychology know it as deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. It was coined by Jennifer Freyd to describe how an individual abuser reacts when confronted. But this synthesis scales it up. It talks about systemic DARVO.
And that systemic version is what underpins everything from the initial British invasion of Australia to how modern family courts handle reports of harm. If you're a woman reporting abuse, the system often flips the script, discrediting you as hysterical or non-compliant. The conduct isn't judged by the harm it caused, but by the social position of the person who did it. If the state is the actor, the harm is denied or minimized. If you're the victim, you become the offender for even speaking up.
It creates this closed intelligence loop, or what the author calls CI in family. It's a surveillance environment where information is tightly controlled, and the victim has nowhere to turn because every exit is guarded by an institution that's already bought into the abuser's narrative. You mentioned the 15-year pattern. How does that compound over time?
It's the layering effect. Year 1 might be interpersonal isolation. Year 5 is financial ruin through legal costs. Year 10 is the loss of sovereignty as you become a risk profile for child services or housing agencies. By year 15, the psychological toll is so high that the victim's rational fear of the system is misdiagnosed as pathology. The system creates exhaustion and then records that exhaustion as dysfunction. That's the ultimate DARVO move, using the victim's own injuries as evidence against them.
Which leads us to the end-me scam. The 4 steps are essentially a roadmap to terminal collapse. You have the initial entrapment, the structural isolation where the state removes the safety net, the systemic DARVO where the victim is blamed for their own distress, and finally, the engineered outcome where the pressure becomes so unsustainable that the individual sees no way out but death.
And the scam part isn't just the death itself, it's the post-death DARVO. Even after the victim is gone, the institutions often double down on the narrative that they were just unstable or failed to engage with services. It protects the institutional legacy. According to research from the Australian Institute of Criminology and scholars like Stark, this is a crisis of civic infrastructure. When institutions practice DARVO, they don't just harm one person, they hollow out the very idea of protection.
It shifts the focus from why didn't she leave to why was she kept there by the very systems meant to free her. It's a sobering look at how intelligence, psychology, and colonial-style policing can merge into a trap that lasts decades. If this analysis changes how you see the systems around you, consider sharing it with someone who needs to see the patterns behind the noise.